Olga, how are you? I just want to conduct an interview in here in Curator's Voice Her Projects with your work in here. I just want to make pose you the first question. Where were you born, and how have been your life as an artist? Where have you been living?
Well, my parents were European, and they immigrated to this country with my brother, and I was born in the United States. But my influences have always been European. For some reason, they brought me up, and then I was directed in my first experiences with painting by a European. And then eventually, when I graduated from high school, I became a pupil of Amédée aux Enfants, also European, and a very extraordinary personality with a great deal of enthusiasm, rather like yours. One rarely finds that, and that was great inspiration for me. And afterwards, after art school, he had established his School of Fine Arts in New York City. After art school, I traveled a bit and went to South America, and there I met my husband in Ecuador. And there I continued to live for 25 years after I married.
In Ecuador?
Yes, so
Wow.
really it's been influences that were not entirely American. It's a kind of a fusion with American, European, and then finally South America.
That's interesting. And how do you find the difference between your experience in the States and in Ecuador? Because it's interesting how the artists absorb different cultures.
Well, there's a tension, of course, but I've always been drawn to the more rural. I love the influence of nature. You can find it in my work, even though it's not a landscape at all times, but it's a certain freedom and openness that I crave. And this was the case where, combined with that adolescence, those 20-ish years where one has all these temptations and so forth, that combined with the attractions that Ecuador had for me, and I was very happy at the time to remain and to live there.
Very interesting. And now I just want to talk a little bit about your works in here, because they are very connected to nature, but at the same time they look very abstract. We feel the suggestive forms of nature, but at the same time it's just like waves of color and waves of luminosity. What can you explain us about your work in this exhibition?
Well, after art school, my work became more and more abstract. I worked in hard edge abstract, and at the time one worked in oils because acrylics were not popular still. They were being perfected. And then I went into constructivism, very strictly, very rigid and disciplined. And from there, then I learned to use the airbrush and did several works.
The airbrush? Wow.
Several years of airbrushed works with which I exhibited in Sao Paulo in the biennial, and traveled to Europe as well with these pictures. And after that, I adventured. It's been a long trip, and one feels so many temptations. But I went into watercolor then, and gouache, and these different water medias. And this required that I open up and have more freedom in my work and transparency, but I never left the discipline far behind. My orientation was music, and when I was very little, my father was a professional musician and my brother as well, and their friends were all musicians. So they would get together and talk about music and musical phrases and analyze performances. And they discussed certain melodies and the way they were executed. And it came to defining which was more satisfactory, this interpretation or this other. And in this comparison, I finally was able to actually feel the difference between one and the other and know why it was better. And their justification was always, well, because it's more beautiful this way. So this was my orientation. This was the formation of my aesthetic sensibility.
And how that could be reflected in your work, for example, in this work, which is all blue in here. How is music reflected in your work?
Well, it aspires to something more beautiful all the time. It's not something that is fascinated by drama and threats of different kind or dangers. It's aspiring, and it seeks not exactly repose, but fulfillment.
Very good. You were telling before the interview that you wanted to express high dimensions of life with this work, and that horizontal line meant to be.
Yes, for example, in this picture, which I call cliffs, simply because it didn't start out to be cliffs. It was more psychological in that way, but then it began to take shape. As I worked on it, my serenity is described in these horizontals. I think that's the psychological experience.
Because they represent somehow a very calm movement, the horizontal lines, successive horizontal lines that we see here.
Exactly. It's not a horizontal picture, but it has steps, horizontal steps, as if one were rising and understanding that this is a delay and that the next step is just as reassuring. And finally, there is the experience here of space, of outdoors, let's say, of a tranquil sky and brightness above.
And also I see very much the blue color used in different hues and reflecting transparencies like waters, like the sky. It's a combination of nature, but also, as you said before, is somehow touching the spiritual part of human beings in that sense.
Yes, this is a this is kind of progression towards that aspiration. And may I speak of
Yes, of course. This one in here is completely opposite, I would say.
This, which is right next to this composition, also horizontal, but it has a lot of vertical lines. And vertical might refer one's sensibilities to a forest, woods. And I always feel that a forest is protective. This, however, is not an outside picture. This is an inside, where one feels the protection, perhaps, of one's home, and the warmth in this luminous part is not a cold light, but a warm light and inviting.
I see that you chose, brown colors, combining with warm colors in here. And only one section of luminosity, and the other one is just like the protection of Earth. Because brown colors is connected to Earth too.
It's rather like a group of people surrounding perhaps a fire.
Fire, yes.
A hearth.
Yeah, connected to flames.
Something that is warmth and inviting.
And I see also that then you are representing it symbolically, we could say. One part is the air, the water,
yeah.
And in here would be the fire and the earth, like a cosmic elements in the opposite but connected.
And this rather protected, and this rather open and spacious.
And spacious, and like levitating into the atmosphere in there. Olga, it's been a very great pleasure to interview you, and I hope that you will continue rising up with this kind of proposal for the Florida artist, and for the Miami exhibition in Shifting Vision, where you are participating right now.
Well, it's very stimulating to be here.
I'm very proud of all the explanation you've told us today. Thank you very much, Olga. Thank you.